You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't during some big fight or a dramatic late-night argument. It was during a conversation about something as trivial as which brand of coffee we should buy for the house. She laughed at my suggestion, not in a sweet, teasing way like she used to, but in that subtle, sharp way that makes you feel small. It was such a stupid moment, but I remember standing there, holding a bag of coffee beans, wondering when exactly I had stopped being the man she respected. That's the thing about these cracks. They start quietly. You don't wake up one day with a broken marriage. It's 1,000 little moments where you're overlooked, dismissed, and slowly made to feel irrelevant. For me, the breaking point wasn't even when I found out about him. It was realizing that I had become invisible to her long before he came into the picture. I used to be the one who made her laugh until she cried. Now, when I talked, she stared at her phone, scrolling like my words didn't matter. And then there was that day with the coffee colleagues. I didn't plan to spy on her. I hate that I even thought about it. But something in my gut screamed at me to pay attention. She wasn't just grabbing coffee, I knew it. I could feel it in my bones. That evening I sat in my car near the cafe she mentioned, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I hated myself for being there. I hated that I had become this paranoid, insecure version of myself. But when I finally looked through the window, I saw her face, lit up, alive, leaning in towards a man I didn't recognize. And that's when it hit me like a punch to the chest. She hadn't looked at me like that in years. I didn't storm in or make a scene. I just sat there, watching from behind the glass, realizing that I was already gone from her heart. The worst part? I still loved her. That night, I couldn't even bring myself to confront her. I lay next to Elise in bed, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone with that faint smile she didn't even try to hide anymore. I wondered who she was texting. Was it him? Was she laughing at something he said while I lay there pretending to sleep? I wanted to grab the phone, to demand the truth, but I didn't. I just stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. That's who I had become, a silent ghost in my own house, too afraid of the answer to even ask the question. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, that mechanical peck she gives when she's distracted, and left early for work. I stood at the kitchen counter, watching her car disappear, and felt this cold weight in my stomach. I couldn't keep pretending. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my keys and drove to her office, parking a few streets away like some nervous detective in a bad movie. I sat there for hours. My heart pounded every time the office doors opened. And then, just before lunch, I saw her, walking out with him. Mark. I didn't even know his name yet, but I knew him the moment I saw them together. He was taller than me, sharper, confident in that easy way that made me feel instantly small. She laughed at something he said, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in years. It tore me apart. I followed them to that same cafe. I know how pathetic that sounds, but I couldn't stop myself. I sat in my car across the street, watching them through the window as they leaned in close, talking like no one else existed. I swear my chest felt like it was caving in. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just harmless coffee with a colleague. I was losing her, and she didn't even care enough to hide it. I didn't confront her that day either. Instead, I went home, sat on the floor of our kitchen, and stared at the cold tiles for what felt like hours. My mind kept replaying the look on her face, that spark in her eyes when she talked to him. It was the same look she used to give me when we first met. I couldn't decide what hurt more, that she was giving it to someone else, or that I hadn't even noticed when she stopped giving it to me. I didn't sleep that night, and by morning I knew I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. The next morning, I woke up with this ugly, gnawing determination eating away at me. It wasn't like me to snoop or dig into someone's private life. I always believed in giving people space, especially Elise. But that morning, I didn't care about my principles or my pride. I needed to know. I needed to be sure. I spent half the day pacing our living room like some deranged version of myself, picking up my phone and putting it down, fighting with this voice in my head, telling me that maybe, just maybe, I was already too late. When Elise went to take a shower, I did something I'm not proud of. I grabbed her phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in the passcode, but when I finally got in, my world tilted. There they were, messages from M. It wasn't overtly romantic, but it didn't need to be. "Thanks for last night. I can't remember the last time I laughed that hard. One message read, and another, we should do it again soon. Just you and me. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I wanted to confront her right then, but I froze. What would I even say? That I'd been spying on her phone? That I'd turned into the pathetic husband who scrolls through texts for scraps of truth? I put the phone back exactly how I found it, my hands still trembling, and pretended nothing happened when she came out of the shower, humming like she had nothing to hide. The next few days were torture. Every smile she gave me felt fake. Every late night at work felt like a knife twisting deeper. I started noticing small things, how she'd suddenly wear perfume for office meetings, how her laughter on the phone sounded softer, warmer, as if it wasn't meant for me anymore. I was living with a stranger, and the worst part was that I still loved her so much it hurt to breathe. One evening I followed her again. I know, it's pathetic, but I couldn't stop myself. She said she was grabbing coffee with her colleagues, and I needed to see for myself. This time, they weren't at the cafe. They were walking down by the riverside, just the two of them, laughing like they were sharing some secret world I wasn't part of. I felt like an intruder in my own life. I wanted to scream, to run up and drag her away, but I just stood there in the shadows, watching the woman I married give her heart to someone else piece by piece. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the kitchen floor again, staring at the cracks between the tiles. I thought about the promises we made on our wedding day, and I wondered if any of them meant anything to her anymore. Did she even think about me when she smiled at him like that? Or had I just become another piece of furniture in our house, something familiar but invisible? By morning, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Angry at her, angry at myself, angry at the way I had let our marriage rot while I pretended everything was fine. I knew I couldn't keep silent any longer. I needed answers, even if they shattered me completely. By the time Elise got home that evening, I had rehearsed 100 different speeches in my head. Every scenario I imagined ended with her admitting she was wrong, apologizing, maybe even crying in my arms. But when I finally stood in front of her, the words I had practiced vanished, replaced by a pathetic, trembling whisper. "Who is he?" She froze, halfway through taking off her coat, her face tightening in a way that told me she knew exactly who I meant. She didn't ask who, or what are you talking about, the way an innocent person would. No, she just looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes, like I was a problem she hadn't figured out how to solve yet. "Don't do this right now," she said, her voice low and steady, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. That tone made something snap in me. "Don't do this right now? Elise, I saw you. I saw you with him by the river. I've read the messages. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I don't notice the way you look at him?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. All the frustration, the sleepless nights, the silent agony. It all poured out in a flood I couldn't control. She didn't yell back. That almost made it worse. She just stared at me, her arms crossed, like I was some sad little man clawing for scraps of dignity. "You've been spying on me, following me?" she asked finally, her voice dripping with disgust. It was as if I was the one betraying her. That twisted my gut. "Don't you dare turn this on me," I shouted, louder than I ever had in our entire marriage. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the counter just to stay steady. After a long, suffocating silence, she finally spoke. "It's not what you think," she said softly, but there was no warmth in her voice. "Mark is just someone I can talk to, someone who listens." That one line cut deeper than any confession of love could have. Someone who listens. Did she mean I wasn't enough? That all those nights I tried to ask how she was, all the times I cooked dinner or tried to make her laugh, they meant nothing because I wasn't this Mark? I don't remember much after that. I remember slamming my fist against the wall, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed to feel something other than the crushing weight in my chest. She didn't flinch. She just walked past me, grabbed her bag, and said, "I'm staying at my sister's tonight." And then she was gone. Just like that, as if I wasn't even worth fighting with. I stood there in the empty house, the silence screaming louder than any argument we'd ever had. My mind spiraled. Was this how it ended? Not with a fight, but with her calmly walking out, leaving me to drown in my own thoughts? I paced the kitchen for hours, replaying every moment of the last few months. Every time I had ignored my gut, because I didn't want to believe she could do this to me. When I finally sat down, I felt numb. I didn't even cry. There were no tears left in me. All I had was this gnawing fear that the woman I loved was already gone, replaced by someone I couldn't reach anymore. I knew then that I couldn't just let this slide. I needed to know everything, how deep this went, what they did together, what she felt for him. I wasn't ready for the answers, but I couldn't live in the dark any longer. The night Elise walked out, I sat in that suffocating silence for hours, replaying every detail of our last conversation. Her words kept echoing in my head. Someone who listens. That wasn't just a passing remark, it was a dagger. I couldn't stop wondering if she had already chosen him, if this Mark was not just a colleague, but the man she turned to when she no longer saw me as enough. The thought made me sick. I paced the kitchen like a trapped animal, unable to sit still, my mind spinning in 1,000 directions. Part of me wanted to drive to her sister's house and demand answers, but another part of me couldn't handle seeing the truth in her eyes. By midnight, I found myself staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. We looked so happy back then, like two idiots who believed that love alone could weather anything. What happened to us? When did we stop being a team and start living as two strangers sharing the same roof? I wanted to blame Mark, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the full story. Something between us had died long before he appeared, and I'd been too blind or too cowardly to face it. Still, the thought of him laughing with her, listening to her secrets, made me burn inside. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. I skipped work entirely. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her social media, trying to find anything, any trace of him. There wasn't much, but I noticed she had started liking photos from places we never talked about. Little things, like a coffee shop 3 blocks from her office, or a street musician near the Riverwalk. Were these places they went together? Was she weaving another life just outside my view, leaving breadcrumbs I wasn't supposed to follow? Later that afternoon, I did something I swore I'd never do. I went through her drawers. It felt wrong, but I needed answers. That's when I found it, a small receipt from that Riverside cafe. 2 lattes, 2 croissants. The date? The same night she told me she was working late on a presentation. I sat there holding that thin piece of paper, like it was a death sentence. My stomach turned, and I thought I might throw up. When Elise came home that night, I tried to act normal, but I'm a terrible actor. I burned dinner because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. She noticed. She always notices. She gave me this suspicious glance, like she could sense I knew something. "Are you okay?" she asked. I wanted to scream, "No, I'm not okay, because I'm married to someone who doesn't love me anymore." But instead, I nodded, smiled weakly, and said I was fine. I hated myself for being so weak. After she went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the door, wondering if she was really asleep or just pretending while she texted him. I felt like I was living with a stranger who had 1 foot out the door and no intention of turning back. My thoughts turned darker with every hour that passed. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to know if I was fighting for something that had already died. The next morning, while she was showering, I grabbed her phone again. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the messages. They weren't openly romantic, but they didn't have to be. It was in the tone, the inside jokes, the late-night texts about how tough her day was, and how nice it was to have someone who understands. I slammed the phone down on the counter, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts. That's when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just hurt. I was starting to lose control of myself. I knew I couldn't keep watching from the sidelines. Something had to break, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be my marriage or me. I don't even remember falling asleep that night. My mind was too twisted with questions and anger to find rest. When I finally woke, the house felt colder than usual, like every wall had absorbed the tension between us. Elise was already gone, her side of the bed perfectly smooth, not even a trace of warmth left behind. I stood there staring at that empty space for what felt like forever, trying to understand when she stopped being the woman I thought I knew. There was a moment, just one, where I wanted to pack a bag, leave a note, and disappear from this nightmare. But that's not who I am. I don't walk away, even when every sign tells me I should. Instead, I decided I needed proof, something undeniable. I was tired of feeling like the crazy husband who was losing his mind over just coffee with colleagues. So I took a day off work, claiming I wasn't feeling well, and followed her schedule. I waited near her office, parked 2 streets down, my heart pounding like I was about to commit some crime. I hated what I was doing, but the truth was eating me alive. Around 3 p.m., I saw her. Elise walked out of the building, her hair loose, wearing that red coat I used to love, the one she only wore on special occasions. She wasn't alone. Mark was with her. Of course it was him. The way she smiled at him as they crossed the street was enough to make me grip the steering wheel until my hands hurt. They weren't holding hands, but there was this closeness between them, like they didn't need to touch to know exactly what the other was thinking. I felt like I was watching a version of my wife that no longer existed for me. They didn't go to the cafe this time. Instead, they walked down a narrow street lined with antique shops and stopped at a small bookstore. I watched as Mark held the door for her, and she laughed at something he said before stepping inside. That laugh, it gutted me. I hadn't heard her laugh like that with me in years. For a long moment, I sat there frozen, every instinct screaming at me to walk away before I shattered completely. But I didn't. I got out of the car and followed them inside. The bell above the bookstore door rang as I entered, and I spotted them near the back, browsing shelves like a picture-perfect couple. Elise didn't see me right away, but when she did, the color drained from her face. It was like she'd been caught doing something far worse than sharing a laugh. Mark glanced between us, his brows furrowed, clearly confused. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharp, but there was a hint of panic in it too. "I could ask you the same thing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though my chest felt like it might cave in. Mark took a step back, as if he didn't want to be part of whatever storm was brewing, but I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked on Elise. "Is this what you've been doing every time you say you're working late? Wandering bookstores with your colleague?" She glanced at Mark, then back at me, and I swear I saw something shift in her expression. Like, for a split second, she wanted to say something honest, but then she clamped her jaw shut. "This isn't what it looks like," she muttered. I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it looks like my wife would rather spend her afternoons with someone else than with me. It looks exactly like what I've been afraid of." People were starting to look at us, their curious eyes burning holes in my back. Elise grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. "Not here," she hissed, dragging me outside before I could make an even bigger scene. Mark stayed behind, probably relieved to be out of the line of fire. Once we were out on the street, I pulled my arm away. "I can't keep pretending this isn't happening," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't keep watching you drift away from me like this." She stared at me, her face unreadable, and for a long, terrifying moment, I thought she might tell me it was over. But instead, she said something I didn't expect. "Come home. We need to talk." Those words, simple, heavy, hit me harder than any denial or confession. I didn't know what waited for me at home, but I knew this was it. One way or another, I was going to get the truth. When we got home, the silence between us was deafening. Elise didn't even take off her coat right away. She just stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall like she was gathering strength for whatever she was about to say. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I walked into the living room, every step heavier than the last. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles ached, and waited. It felt like hours before she finally came in, closing the door behind her. She looked different, harder, almost like the Elise I married had been replaced by someone else entirely. "Do you want to know everything?" she asked quietly. I didn't even answer. I just stared at her, my silence daring her to continue. "Mark is not what you think," she started, but I could tell from the tremor in her voice that there was something she wasn't saying. "He's a friend, someone I've been able to talk to, because I can't talk to you anymore." That hit me like a hammer. I opened my mouth to speak, but she cut me off. "Do you know how lonely it feels to live with someone who never really sees you? Who's there in body but not in mind? You're here, but you're not here, and I've been drowning in that silence for years." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Not here? Elise, I've done everything for us. I work, I pay the bills, She held up a hand to stop me, her eyes glistening with anger. "That's just it. You think providing is enough? But when was the last time you asked me how I really felt? When was the last time you looked at me the way you used to? Like I was more than just someone you live with?" Her words cut deep because, in some twisted way, she was right. I thought about all those nights I came home late, too tired to do anything but collapse on the couch. I thought about the arguments we avoided because neither of us wanted to deal with the discomfort of being honest. But even so, I wasn't ready to accept that she had turned to someone else instead of coming to me. "So, you replaced me?" I asked, my voice raw. "You decided Mark was easier to talk to, easier to smile at, easier to care about. Do you even realize what that does to me?" She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, and for a terrifying moment, I thought she might take it off. "I didn't plan for any of this," she whispered. "I didn't go looking for him. It just happened." I felt seen for the first time in years, and I didn't want to lose that. Those words shattered me more than any confession of love for Mark could have. I stood up, pacing the room because I couldn't sit still, because if I didn't move, I thought I might scream. "So what now?" I asked finally. "Do you love him? Do you want him instead of me?" She didn't answer right away. Her silence was worse than any yes or no. I could feel the answer hanging in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. Finally, she said, "I don't know what I want anymore." That single sentence was like a final twist of the knife. I walked out of the room before I could say something I'd regret. I ended up in the kitchen, staring at the cold, empty countertop, my reflection in the dark window looking like a stranger. I hated the man I'd become, pathetic, jealous, desperate. But I hated even more the thought that Elise might never come back to me, that Mark had already taken the part of her I loved most. When I finally went back into the living room, she was sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. She looked small, fragile in a way I hadn't seen in years. I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't. Something inside me had broken, and I wasn't sure if it could be fixed. I sat down across from her and said, "Tomorrow, I want the truth. All of it. No more games, no more half answers. I need to know if we're still something worth fighting for, or if I'm just holding on to a ghost." She didn't respond. She just nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't know if I wanted her to say yes or no. The next morning felt different. The air was heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I woke up before Elise, sitting at the edge of the bed with my head in my hands, trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to happen. I was tired of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage, tired of being stuck between anger and heartbreak. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to know if there was still something worth saving. When Elise walked into the kitchen, she looked as exhausted as I felt. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and for the first time in a long time, I saw her vulnerability, not the cold, distant version of her I'd been seeing lately. We sat down across from each other, no phones, no distractions, just the two of us, and the mountain of silence we had built over the past year. "I don't want to lose you," I started, my voice shaking. "But I can't keep living like this, Elise. I need the truth, everything. I need to know what I mean to you, or if I mean anything at all." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes searching mine, and then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't want him. I never wanted him more than I wanted you. Mark was just easy to talk to because I was scared to talk to you. I thought you didn't care anymore. I thought I had become invisible to you." Her words hit me like a wave, but for once it wasn't anger I felt. It was guilt. Guilt for all the times I had been too busy, too tired, too distracted to notice her slipping away. We talked for hours, really talked, like we hadn't in years. She told me how lonely she had felt, how she didn't even recognize the person we had become as a couple. I told her how I had been afraid too, but instead of reaching for her, I had buried myself in work, thinking that providing was enough. We sat there, both of us realizing that our marriage wasn't broken because of Mark. It was broken because we had stopped choosing each other every single day. By the end of that conversation, something shifted between us. It wasn't like all the pain disappeared instantly, but for the first time, I felt like we were on the same side again. She deleted Mark's number in front of me and told me she was willing to go to counseling, to do whatever it took to fix us. For the first time in months, I believed her. That evening, we went for a walk along the same riverside, where I had once watched her laugh with someone else. But this time, it was just the two of us. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. She reached for my hand halfway down the path, and when our fingers intertwined, I felt that familiar warmth I thought I'd lost forever. We're not perfect. We have a long way to go. But that day, we made a choice to fight for each other, to stop letting silence kill what we once promised to protect. And as we walked back home, hand in hand, I realized something. I hadn't lost her. I had almost lost myself, but she was still there, waiting for me to find her again.